Why was she the only one who noticed the horizon was bleeding? Not the kind of red that sunsets paint across the sky, soft and forgiving, but the kind that clung heavy in the air, mixed with smoke, ash, and the metallic sting of war. To everyone else in the outpost, it was just another evening. Soldiers walked between tents, the clatter of gear echoing, boots grinding against gravel. Laughter flickered in pockets, a desperate attempt at normal. The mess hall smelled of reheated rations. The low hum of generators masked the silence no one dared acknowledge. But she saw it, she always saw it. Captain Elena Torres leaned against the sandbag wall, helmet tucked under her arm, scanning that horizon as if it carried an answer. Or maybe a warning. She wasn't sure anymore. She told herself it was just habit, a sniper's curse, to notice every shift in the wind, every shade of color, every movement too far away for others to see. But deep down, she knew it was something else. A restlessness. A question that gnawed at her ribs. Why was she here? Her unit thought they knew her. They thought she was just another soldier in this forgotten corner of the war. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Tors. The voice cracked through her thoughts. Sergeant Lewis, heavy boots pounding against the gravel, his face lined deeper than his years should allow. He squinted against the dying light, then at her. You skipping chow again? She forced a small smile, one that never quite reached her eyes. Not hungry. Lewis shook his head, grumbling something about her disappearing too much, but he didn't push. No one ever really did. Maybe they respected her distance, or maybe they feared what silence often carried. She waited until his shadow disappeared into the tent line before exhaling, shoulders loosening just slightly. The truth was, she couldn't eat. Not with the way her stomach coiled each time she looked east. Out there, beyond that red haze, lay tonight's target. The briefing had been clear: enemy artillery, camouflaged, hammering supply routes. Too many convoys lost, too many names etched into stone back home. The mission sounded straightforward: a covert approach, pinpoint strikes, extraction before dawn. But something about it felt wrong. Not tactically. Tactically it was solid, but in her chest, that's where the unease burned, like the horizon itself had crept into her lungs. She adjusted the strap on her rifle, fingers brushing the cold steel. That rifle had been her anchor through years of sand and silence. The one constant. She could still feel the weight of her first confirmed shot, the way the world went quiet after the trigger broke. No one tells you about that silence. No one tells you how heavy it sits on your chest after the cheering fades. Elena remembered too well. Inside the command tent, the air was thick with heat, maps scattered across the table, red markers circling positions like blood pooling across paper. Lieutenant Harris paced, his youthful energy almost out of place against the weary stares of veterans hunched in folding chairs. Timing is critical, Harris said, slapping a ruler against the map. We move at 2300, approach on foot. Tors, you'll take overwatch from the ridge. Standard 2-3 formation. Extraction window closes at 4:30. Understood. The group muttered acknowledgments, but Elena only half heard. Her eyes lingered on the photo tacked in the corner of the map. Grainy, taken from drone surveillance, a cluster of hills, a ridge. Shadows that seemed too thick, too intentional. Her pulse slowed. That ridge. She knew it. Not from reconnaissance, not from briefings, from memory. A flash, her father's voice, years ago, on a fishing trip before the world fractured into war. You can't always trust what you see on the surface, Mija. Sometimes shadows hide the sharpest rocks. She blinked. The tent faded back in. Harris was still talking, his words blending into the buzz of the generator. No one else saw it. The pattern, the trap waiting to snap. But she did. Elena, Harris's tone sharpened. Everyone's eyes turned. She straightened. Overwatch, ridge position, copy. Harris nodded, satisfied. But she caught Lewis watching her a second longer, noticing the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers drummed against her helmet. When the briefing ended, Soldiers shuffled out, their banter a weak disguise for nerves. Elena lingered, staring once more at the grainy photo, her reflection faint in the plastic sleeve covering it. That ridge. Why did it feel like fate had drawn a circle around it long before tonight? She zipped her jacket against the chill. The desert night always stole warmth faster than memory could replace it. Outside, the sky had dimmed to ash, stars flickering through smoke trails. The base settled into the tense quiet that came before missions. Laughter died down, radios clicked, weapons checked. Elena moved to her corner of the barracks, gear laid out with surgical precision. She sat on the edge of the cot, lacing boots she'd worn thin across too many countries that never wanted her there. Her hand brushed against the pocket of her rucksack. She hesitated, then pulled out a folded photo. The edges frayed, corners soft from years of hiding it. A little girl with braids, a smile too wide for the frame. Her sister. Gone now. Not by war, but by something quieter, crueler. Illness. A fight Elena couldn't win with rifles or strategy. The one battle that had driven her into every other. She pressed the photo against her chest, eyes shut. For a moment the hum of the bass fell away. All she could hear was her sister's laugh, high and bright, echoing like bells in the summer air. That's why she was here. Not revenge, not glory, not even duty, but because she refused to let more names slip into silence, not if she could stop it. Even if it burned her alive. The radio crackled. Tours gear up 5 minutes. Her eyes opened. The horizon outside was darker now, but in her chest the fire was brighter. She slid the photo back into her pocket, sealing it like a secret no one else could carry. Helmet on, rifle slung, boots steady against the gravel. As she stepped out into the night, Lewis fell into stride beside her. He didn't say much, just glanced at her once, like he knew she was carrying something heavier than her pack. The convoy doors slammed shut. Engines rumbled. Soldiers exchanged glances, nods, the unspoken "see you" on the other side woven into their silence. Elena sat against the cold metal wall, rifle across her lap, eyes tracing the flicker of lights inside the transport. Faces around her blurred, young, old, scarred, afraid. She caught fragments of whispers. One soldier muttering about his daughter's birthday. Another about the dog waiting back home. Small lives, fragile hopes, each one another reason not to fail. The transport jolted forward. The desert swallowed them whole. And as the horizon burned darker red, Elena couldn't shake the thought. What if the trap waiting in those shadows was meant for her? What did silence sound like when 20 soldiers breathed in the dark? Inside the transport, the engine's low growl swallowed words. Helmets knocked softly against metal walls with each jolt. Boots pressed tight against the floor, bracing against turns no one could see. The desert wind clawed at the thin armor of the vehicle, sand rattling against steel like whispered warnings. Elena sat near the back, eyes closed, head tilted as if she were resting. But she wasn't resting. Her mind was tracing maps, angles, the weight of shadows, that ridge. She could feel the photo in her pocket, pressing like a heartbeat. Across from her, Private Malik chewed at his fingernail, eyes darting between the red glow of the interior lights and the rifle resting across his knees. He was 19, barely more than a boy. Elena remembered when he arrived at base 2 months ago, still carrying the awkward stiffness of someone new to war. He had told her once in a quiet corner of the mess hall that his mother called every week, that he hadn't told her about the nightmares yet. She opened her eyes and caught him looking at her. He froze, sheepish. "You'll be fine," she said quietly. Malik nodded too quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Don't call me ma'am, just Tours." The vehicle lurched suddenly, throwing them sideways. Someone cursed under their breath. Harris's voice cut through the radio from the front cabin. "Convoy halt. Dust cloud ahead. Checking routes." The soldiers shifted, tightening grips on weapons. Dust clouds meant movement. Movement meant risk. Elena tilted her head, listening. Engines idled. The desert whispered outside, restless. A gust of wind carried grit through a crack in the hatch. She inhaled the taste of iron and earth. Something in it felt wrong. Minutes stretched. Finally, the radio crackled again. All clear, moving. Engines roared back to life. The convoy pushed deeper. Elena's chest tightened. Not all clear. Her gut said otherwise. Hours bled into the silence. By the time the convoy slowed again, the horizon had folded itself into total black, broken only by the faint shimmer of stars. The transport door screeched open, cold night air flooding in. Dismount, move. Boots hit dirt, rifles slung, gear shifted into place. Soldiers fanned out, scanning the open desert. Elena stepped down last, her eyes immediately climbing the silhouette of the ridge ahead. It loomed darker than the night itself, jagged against the stars. A place built for ambushes, for endings. She knelt, brushing her gloved fingers over the ground. Tracks, not fresh but not old either. Vehicles heavier than theirs. The sand still remembered. Tors, Harris's voice snapped. Ridge position now. She stood, rifle secured, and gave a sharp nod. But she didn't move right away. She let her gaze linger on the shadows above. She could almost feel eyes watching back. Lewis caught her hesitation, his brow furrowed, silent question. She just shook her head and started climbing. The ridge was cruel, each step a battle against loose stone and shifting sand. Her breath fogged inside her mask. Muscles burned. But she welcomed the pain. It sharpened her focus, narrowed the noise in her mind. Halfway up she paused, crouching low, scanning the slope. Nothing, just jagged rocks and dry brush whispering with the wind. But the silence, it wasn't natural. Every desert has a song, crickets, owls, the hiss of snakes sliding under sand. Tonight, nothing. She pressed herself against the rock, eyes narrowing. The world below was faintly lit by the convoy's muted lamps. Soldiers moved in formation, spreading toward the objective. Harris led, his voice clipped over the comms. Elena adjusted her scope, sighting up the ridge line. Darkness swallowed everything, but she felt it. The weight. Her finger hovered near the trigger. A crack. Not from her. From above. Her instincts screamed, and then it came. The ridge exploded in fire. Machine guns roared from the cliffs, tearing silence apart. Bullets raked the sand below, sparking against steel, shredding the air. Soldiers dropped flat, shouting, returning fire blindly into the dark. The convoy erupted into chaos. Elena's pulse slammed against her ribs. She rolled hard behind cover, scope snapping upward. Shadows moved, muzzles flashed. She didn't think, she acted. Trigger squeeze, one flash silenced. Another. She pivoted, tracking heat, the rhythm of fire guiding her. But they were pinned, heavily. The enemy had been waiting. Below, Harris barked orders, his voice straining through comms. Find cover, suppressive fire, Tors, talk to me. I've got eyes, she snapped back, already shifting position. 3 nests at least, maybe more, they're dug in. Then clear them. Her teeth clenched, as if it were that simple. She fired again. 1 nest went dark, but for every flash she silenced, 2 more opened. Screams cut through comms. A soldier hit, another crying for a medic. The ridge spat death, and Elena's rifle felt like a whisper against a storm. She ground her teeth, moving higher, faster, ignoring the fire snapping at stone near her head. She knew what this was. She had felt it in the photo. A trap. But why hadn't anyone else seen it? She reached a ledge, pressed tight against rock, lungs burning. Her mind screamed with choices: stay hidden, keep firing, protect from above. Or break cover, climb higher, take the risk to end it faster. Below, Malik's voice cried out over comms. We're exposed down here. Tors, do something. Her chest clenched. His voice cracked like her sister's once had, small and desperate, begging her to fix something she couldn't. No, not again. She broke cover. Stones tumbled as she sprinted up the slope, rifle snapping to shoulders, shots biting at flashes. Sparks lit her path. The air hissed with bullets. But she climbed higher, closer, until the enemy fire faltered, confused at the sudden threat on their flank. She dove into a hollow, rifle steady. Her scope locked on a gunner reloading. Trigger, he fell. Another swung toward her, shouting in a language she didn't understand. She silenced him before the words finished. Her comms buzzed with Harris's voice, tight with disbelief. "Tors, what the hell are you doing up there?" Her breath came in ragged bursts. She pressed her back against stone, sweat cold against her skin. "Ending it," she whispered. Above her, shadows shifted again. More footsteps, more voices. She wasn't done. But in the pit of her chest, the fire burned brighter. This wasn't just survival, this was choice. And she wasn't turning back. How long could one heart beat against the roar of machine guns? Elena pressed herself against the ridge, lungs dragging fire, sweat dripping into her eyes. Her rifle was hot against her hands, scope fogged from her breath. Below, chaos bled through the night, Harris shouting over comms, men scrambling for cover, the thud of rounds slamming into sand and steel. Her world had shrunk to inches of stone and fleeting seconds. "Tors, report," Harris's voice cut sharp through her headset. She swallowed, wiping grit from her cheek. "2 nests down, still counting 3. They've got us locked." "Then unlock them." His desperation crackled louder than the radio. She understood. Soldiers were pinned, bleeding. Lives were measured in heartbeats, and she was the only one with angles. But she wasn't a machine. She was one set of eyes, one rifle, one fragile will. Her finger hovered over the trigger again. Then she hesitated. Because in that split second, through her scope, she caught something. A face. Not hardened, not monstrous, just another young man. Eyes wide, teeth clenched, hands shaking as he reloaded. He looked barely older than Malik. Maybe 20, maybe less. Her breath caught. Her sister's face flickered over his, same fragile youth, same unfairness. Her rifle didn't tremble, but her heart did. Why was she here? To kill shadows, or to protect those under her? "Tors," Harris barked again. The decision burned through her chest. She squeezed the trigger. The young man's body jerked, collapsing against the nest. His weapon clattered, fire halting for a moment. Elena forced her breath steady, forced herself to stay cold. It was survival. It was necessary. But the echo of that shot carved deeper than the others. Movement on her flank snapped her back. A muzzle swung her way. She dropped low, fired. The figure fell, tumbling down the slope, body breaking against rock. The ridge stank of gunpowder and sweat now. "Elena," Lewis's voice came over comms, lower, steadier than Harris. "We're losing them, make it count." She grit her teeth, pushing higher again. Her legs screamed with every step, boots slipping on loose gravel. Fire chased her, ricochets sparking around. She moved like she'd trained 1,000 times, but tonight wasn't training. Tonight the cost was names. Below, Malik's cry pierced again. "Medic, someone get him help." She froze, looked down. A soldier lay sprawled, clutching his stomach. Another tried to drag him behind a shattered vehicle. Blood pooled dark against the sand, shining under the thin starlight. The sound, the raw panic in Malik's voice, twisted her insides. Her scope snapped upward again. A nest, 2 gunners. If she didn't silence them, Malik would join the casualty. Her breath slowed, focus narrowed, one shot, a scream, another shot, silence. She sagged against the rock, chest heaving. "Clear," she rasped into comms. But it wasn't clear, not yet. The ridge above still crawled with shadows. And then another sound, different. A low, guttural boom. Mortars. The first shell struck near the convoy, earth erupting in fire and dust. The blast wave rippled up the ridge, knocking Elena sideways. She rolled, grit cutting her palms, ears ringing. Voices screamed below. Chaos multiplied. Her mind raced. They weren't just ambushed, they were surrounded. She dragged herself behind a boulder, spitting dust from her mouth, jamming a new mag into her rifle. Fingers trembled, more from rage than fear. Why hadn't anyone seen this coming? Why hadn't command noticed? Or had they? The thought chilled her spine. Elena, Lewis's voice again strained. We need a way out. Her eyes lifted. Higher on the ridge past the nest she saw the faint outline of trucks, artillery angled downward. Not just gunners, heavy weapons, supplies, command. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't a random ambush. This ridge was their hub, their nest. And she had climbed straight into its jaws. Her radio buzzed again, Harris shouting orders, soldiers panicking. But his words blurred. Because her decision sharpened. She could stay low, keep silencing nests one, by time, but mortars would rip them apart before dawn. Or she could climb higher, push straight into the hornet's nest, risk everything, her cover, her survival, for a chance to end it at the root. Her throat tightened. Her sister's photo pressed against her chest like it wanted an answer. Protect them at any cost. She pressed her palms against the stone, dragging herself up again. Each step heavier, legs trembling, lungs clawing for air. Shadows loomed closer. Voices carried in the night, commands in sharp syllables, boots scuffling across rock. One figure appeared above, silhouetted against stars. He turned, saw her, shouted. She raised her rifle, fired. He fell. But the shout had spread. More shadows swarmed. Bullets sparked against rock around her. She darted behind an outcrop, firing blind, the recoil biting into her shoulder. Her comms hissed with Lewis's voice again. Tors, what the hell are you doing? Her breath came ragged, cutting the head off. Alone. She didn't answer. Because she wasn't climbing for them to understand. She was climbing because she had no choice. Another burst ripped past her. Stone shattered. She ducked, rolled, came up firing. Another shadow fell. Her legs screamed. Her chest burned, but she kept moving, up, always up. And in the chaos, memories bled through, her sister in a hospital bed, frail hand clutching Elena, whispering, "Don't let them stop you from living." Tears stung her eyes, lost to the sweat. She grit her teeth, whispering back into the night, "I'm still here." A burst of fire snapped her focus again. She dropped flat, muzzle sweeping, two figures advancing. She fired. One fell, the other stumbled, screaming. She pushed higher, almost crawling now, fingers clawed at rock, rifle dragged behind. Then she reached it. The crest. Her body trembled, but her scope rose, settling on the artillery parked across the ridge. Trucks, ammo crates, gunners scrambling. Her heart thundered. If she could take them out. But she was one, against dozens. The radio buzzed again, Malik's broken voice. "They're everywhere, we can't hold." Her chest clenched. She couldn't fail them, not tonight, not ever. Her finger pressed against the trigger, but her mind whispered something darker. What if she wasn't meant to come back from this climb? What does a ridge look like when it holds the power to decide who lives and who does? Elena lay flat against the cold rock, chest heaving, scope steady despite the tremor in her arms. Below her, the ridge unfurled into a nightmare, artillery trucks crouched like beasts in the dark, crews loading shells, commanders barking in harsh tones. Shadows darted between crates stacked with ammunition. The smell of fuel and powder clawed at the air, even from where she crouched. She had climbed into the lion's throat. Behind her, the echoes of battle still raged. Harris's voice blared through the comms, clipped, frantic. "We're losing position. They've got us boxed." Another blast shook the ground, mortar fire raining down on the convoy. Soldiers screamed. Radios crackled with calls for medics that would never arrive in time. Elena swallowed hard, eyes fixed on her scope. One shot wouldn't end this. Not two, not 10. This was more than she could cut down alone, and yet she was here, no one else. Her fingers brushed the photo inside her vest, that fragile fold of memory pressed over her heart. Her sister's smile stared back in her mind, wide and defiant, as if daring her to act. Her lips moved silently. "For you." She shifted her scope, sighting the first artillery piece. The barrel angled toward her squad below, a round loaded, fuse sparking to life. Her breath locked. Trigger squeeze. The gunner dropped, body collapsing over the shell. Sparks hissed out. The weapon stilled. Shouts erupted across the ridge. Figures scrambled, eyes scanning, rifles swinging. She moved before they found her, rolled to another hollow, scope snapping to a second truck. Another shot, another body fell, chaos rippled. But she wasn't invisible, not anymore. Bullets hissed past, sparking off stone. She ducked low, grit biting into her cheek. The ridge howled with enemy fire. "Elena," Lewis's voice tore through the comms, "talk to me." She panted, reloading, fingers fumbling. "I've got their artillery, taking them out." "Alone, that's suicide." She swallowed, throat raw. "Better me than all of you." Silence answered, but it wasn't silence. It was a pause, the kind where someone knows you're right but can't bring themselves to say it. She pushed higher again, crawling through the dark. Each movement sharper, faster. She fired, silencing another loader. Smoke poured from the barrels. Shouts turned frantic, like an anthill crushed underfoot. Then a voice cut through. Not English, deeper, commanding. A man stepped into the chaos, silhouetted by the truck lights. Broad, steady, not scrambling like the others. A leader. Her crosshairs froze on his chest. One pull and this ambush might fracture, but her finger didn't move. Not yet, because something about him stopped her. The way he stood, the way his men looked at him. There was history there, a story she'd never hear, buried under uniforms and orders. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then his hand lifted, pointed straight at her. The ridge erupted. Bullets tore the stone apart, forcing her flat. She scrambled back, rock cutting her palms. Sparks showered her. Her ears rang. This wasn't sustainable. She could keep firing until her mags ran dry, but numbers would drown her. Unless... Her eyes darted to the crates stacked behind the artillery. Wooden, fragile, marked with red. Ammo. Her chest tightened. A single shot there and the ridge would light up like the sun. The artillery, the trucks, the crews, all of it gone. But so would she. Her finger hovered over the trigger again. Her sister's voice whispered from memory, "Don't let them stop you from living." Her eyes stung. To live meant to pull back, to hide, to save herself. To protect meant to fire, to burn with them. Her hands shook. The weight of both choices pressed heavier than the rifle. Below, Malik's voice broke through the comms, ragged and terrified. "We can't hold, they're coming through." His cry cut off. Elena's heart stopped. She swung her scope down, scanning desperately. Through smoke and fire, she saw figures dragging Malik behind cover, his rifle slipping from his grip. Blood smeared across his arm, his helmet gone, his face pale. Her stomach knotted. If she didn't act, he wouldn't see tomorrow. If she did act, she might not either. The decision burned inside her chest like a second heartbeat. She steadied her rifle, crosshairs locked on the crate. Her lips trembled, whispering only to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her finger pressed the trigger. A shot cracked the night. The round struck wood, sparks flared, for a breath nothing. Then the ridge roared. The explosion split the sky, a tower of flame surging upward, trucks shattered, artillery twisted into shrapnel. The ground heaved beneath her, throwing her back. Heat seared her skin. Smoke swallowed the stars. Below, the enemy line broke, men screaming, fire raining across their own. Elena slammed against stone, ears ringing, lungs scorched. The blast rolled over her like a wave. Her rifle clattered from her hands. Her comms erupted with shouts, Harris, Lewis, medics, but their words blurred into static. Her body ached heavy, but her eyes stayed open. She turned her head, vision hazy. The ridge burned red, brighter than any horizon she had ever seen. And in her chest, the fire still burned brighter. She sat in the half-light of the barracks, boots still laced from the last march, but her hands trembling against the straps of her vest. The night was unusually still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Outside, muffled laughter of younger soldiers drifted in like echoes from another world, a world she no longer felt part of. Why did their voices sound so free when she carried a silence so heavy? Her decision weighed heavier tonight than the rifle resting across her lap. Orders had come. A mission with no clarity, only whispers. But the silence in between the words said more than the orders themselves. Something was missing. Something they weren't being told. She traced the scar along her forearm, remembering the night that fire chewed through the horizon and turned her life into ash. The memory sharpened every time command spoke in half-truths. She'd lost too much to gamble with shadows again. The door creaked open and Sergeant Cole stepped in. His presence always filled a room with unspoken steadiness. He wasn't her superior, not directly, but he was one of the few who carried his years of service without arrogance. His eyes caught hers. No words, just a subtle nod. A kind of acknowledgement, like he, too, felt the weight pressing against her chest. "You still not sleeping?" he asked finally, voice hushed. "Sleep," she forced a thin laugh. "Feels like a luxury, Sergeant." He eased himself onto the opposite bunk, elbows resting on his knees. "What's really going on with you?" Not the surface answer. For a moment she thought about lying, about masking it with the usual soldier's lines. But the way his tone softened cracked something inside her. "I don't trust this mission," she admitted. "Something off, and if I'm right, people are going to die, good people." Cole leaned back, the springs of the bunk groaning. He didn't dismiss her, didn't tell her paranoia was part of the job. Instead, he studied her face with a slow patience. "And what's eating at you most, the mission, or the choice you know you'll have to make when it all goes sideways?" His words stung with precision. She turned away, staring at the faint outline of her reflection in the small mirror nailed to the wall. Behind her eyes lived the promise she'd once made to her brother before war swallowed him. Never again. Never let them walk blind into death. Outside, a radio crackled with static before cutting into clipped orders. The horizon had begun its faint burn of dawn, red streaks spilling like blood across the sky. She thought of the title they'd given her, sniper, soldier, asset. But none of those words captured the truth of what she was. A woman caught between survival and conscience, between the loyalty she owed and the silence she could no longer carry. She whispered mostly to herself, "When the moment comes, I'll have to choose." Cole heard it. He didn't interrupt. He simply stayed, a steady shadow in the dim barracks, reminding her she wasn't entirely alone, even if the decision was hers alone to bear. The mission briefing at dawn felt colder than usual. Maps unfurled, fingers pointed, jargon spilled. None of it touched the truth. She saw the sidelong glances of other operatives, some too young to question, others too tired to care. Yet every detail only hardened her suspicion. The commander's voice droned. "Extraction is secondary. The primary objective is classified." She felt her stomach knot. Classified. Always the word before bodies were left behind. Always the word before families received folded flags instead of explanations. She studied her team, memorizing their faces. Each one carried a small fragment of life beyond these walls, families, regrets, unspoken dreams. And she knew their futures might depend not on the orders given, but on her refusal to obey them. But the weight of defiance was heavier than any rucksack. If she was wrong, she'd bear the mark of betrayal. If she was right, it might save them all. As the room emptied, Cole lingered behind. He caught her sleeve as she passed. "If it comes down to it," he murmured, "make sure the choice you burn for is the one you can live with." She didn't answer. She couldn't, because she already knew the truth. Living with it was never the part she feared. It was surviving it. And as the doors closed behind her, the red on the horizon deepened, bleeding into the day like a warning she couldn't ignore. The chopper's blades thundered above her head, drowning thought into vibration and roar. She sat strapped in, eyes locked on the horizon bleeding with fire, each flicker of dawn painting the desert in copper and ash. Around her, the team tried to mask their nerves with jokes, with forced calm, with the silence of habit. But she saw it, the twitch of a hand, the glance too quick, the kind of tension that only came when every soldier in the bird sensed something wasn't being said. Why did command insist on secrecy when men and women's lives were at stake? She tightened her grip on the harness, nails biting through the gloves. They didn't know what she knew. They didn't know what she feared. Cole leaned forward across the aisle, tapping her boot with his. A simple grounding gesture. He didn't need words. His eyes asked the question, "Are you steady?" She gave the smallest nod, not because she was steady, but because if she showed doubt, if even one person caught it, the ripple would break morale. And morale was sometimes the only thin armor they had. The pilot's voice crackled in their headsets. 10 minutes out, wind is picking up. 10 minutes, that was all. 10 minutes before silence became action. 10 minutes before she had to make the choice her chest had been burning with since the orders came down. Beside her, Private Torres fiddled with a rosary tucked into his vest. Too young, too eager. She remembered when she was like him, clinging to faith instead of truth. He caught her watching, gave a half smile. "Figure I might need a little extra insurance today." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him insurance came from honesty, not superstition. That he deserved more than to walk blind into something no one had told him. But she swallowed the words. How could she break him open with the truth when she still hadn't decided how far she'd go to stop it? The chopper banked left, mountains cutting jagged against the sun. Heat shimmered below, the land endless and unforgiving. The horizon looked alive, like it burned with some silent warning. Then her earpiece clicked, a secure channel, one voice, the commander. "Operatives confirm. Phase 1, insertion. Phase 2, secure the package. Extraction window conditional." Conditional, the word cut like a blade. Her suspicions were no longer shadows, they were fact. Extraction was never guaranteed. They weren't all meant to come back. She clenched her jaw, her pulse hammering. Did the others hear it the way she did? Or had they already been numbed by too many missions, too many lies? She scanned faces. Cole's stoic focus, Tor's nervous smile, the others with expressions locked in soldiers' masks. Only she seemed awake to it. The commander's voice faded and the roar of blades returned. Her heart burned. Do I tell them? Do I break the silence? She shut her eyes for a beat, hearing her brother's voice in memory. Never again. The chopper dropped altitude, rattling them in their harnesses. Dust whipped across the windows. The landing zone loomed, a barren stretch of earth, no cover, no forgiveness. Her hand slipped toward her rifle, not for comfort but for clarity. Cole leaned close, his voice only for her. "What aren't they saying?" Her chest froze. She hadn't spoken a word, but he'd seen it in her eyes all along. She opened her mouth, but the wheels slammed dirt and the world exploded in noise. Doors flew open. Shouts, commands, boots pounding into sand. The moment had passed, the choice remained. As she leapt into the storm of dust and orders, she carried it inside. The truth no one else knew, and the decision she could no longer escape. The sand cut against her face like knives as the chopper lifted away, blades fatting into distance. The world shrank to silence, heat, and the crunch of boots against scorched earth. She adjusted her rifle, scanning the horizon. Too open, too still. "Form up," the lieutenant barked. His voice carried authority but not reassurance. The squad fanned into formation, each step a ritual against fear. Cole fell in beside her, his shadow overlapping hers in the rising sun. He didn't speak, but his presence pressed against her ribs like a question she still refused to answer. They moved fast, dust trailing behind like ghosts. Ahead, a ridge of black stone cut against the red horizon. That was their mark. That was where command said the package lay. But she knew packages never came without cost. An extraction marked conditional meant only one thing: they were pawns in someone else's gamble. Private Torres stumbled beside her, whispering as though afraid of the silence itself. "Ma'am, why's it so empty out here? Shouldn't there be something?" She swallowed. The truth pressed like fire in her throat. The boy deserved an answer. They all did. But the lieutenant shot them a glance sharp enough to kill words. Obedience weighed heavier than honesty here, for now. Minutes bled into miles. Sweat cut paths through dust on their skin. Every soldier carried the same question in their eyes, though no one dared ask aloud. Then movement, a flicker at the ridge, too quick, too deliberate. "Contact 2 o'clock, a voice snapped. Rifles swung. The silence cracked with tension, but when her scope locked in, the figure wasn't armed. A child, thin, barefoot, frozen in fear as rifles pointed at her chest. The lieutenant's hand rose, signaling to hold fire. But his face, his hesitation, told another story. She felt her gut twist. This wasn't chance. This was bait. Cole muttered low just for her. "They're testing us, waiting to see if we step into it." Her breath caught. Not just insurgents, civilians used as traps. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a labyrinth of moral landmines. The girl ran. Sand kicked under her small feet. The lieutenant shouted for pursuit. But before anyone could move, the ridge erupted, gunfire spitting, stone splintering. The child vanished into the chaos. They dove for cover, bullets shredding air. Heart pounding, ears ringing, she pressed into the sand. The squad scattered behind rocks, firing back in bursts. Shouts mixed with screams. Dust turned red. Through her scope, she caught sight of shapes on the ridge, silhouettes, shifting, moving with coordination. Too many, far too many. This wasn't recon, this wasn't rescue, this was an ambush. And in that storm of fire, her secret blazed clear. Command had sent them into a trap, deliberately. Her throat burned with the weight of it. She wanted to scream it, to tell them all the truth, to break the silence that had been choking her since the briefing. But if she did, would it save them, or shatter them mid-battle? Cole's voice broke through the gunfire, harsh and steady. "What do you see?" She hesitated, the decision tearing her apart. The squad's lives were in her hands just as much as the rifle was. She inhaled, tasting sand, smoke, and fear. What she said or didn't say would change everything. And she knew, as another explosion tore through the ridge, that the moment she dreaded had finally come. The ground shook under the weight of mortars, sand erupting in violent plumes. She pressed her body flat, breath shallow, ears ringing with the relentless thunder of fire. The ridge above spat flame and lead, but all she could hear was her brother's voice. "Never again. Don't let them walk blind." Her finger tightened on the trigger, scope locking onto a figure moving with precision across the rocks. One shot, one collapse, but the satisfaction was hollow, because the truth still burned inside her, louder than the gunfire. She turned to Cole, his face streaked with dust, eyes unflinching even in chaos. He shouted over the storm, "Tell me what you know." The words ripped the silence wide open. Her chest heaved, the decision bursting free. Command knew this was a setup. Extraction was never for all of us. They planned for casualties. The words hit harder than any bullet. Cole's eyes narrowed, not in disbelief, but in grim acknowledgement. Around them, soldiers caught fragments of her voice, their focus snapping, their rhythm faltering for just a breath. The lieutenant snarled, firing blind over cover. "Shut her up, we follow orders." But orders had already crumbled. The squad's eyes were shifting, some to her, some to the ground, some to the ridge that rained death upon them. She felt it then, the burn inside her chest turning into resolve. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about choice. She rose from the sand, heart hammering, and barked into the radio break formation. Flank left, use the canyon, move now. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Cole was up, covering her with bursts of fire, his voice bellowing, "You heard her move." The squad surged, hesitation melting into instinct. They dove toward the canyon, bullets slicing the air behind them. Torres stumbled, nearly falling, until she grabbed his vest and dragged him forward. He looked at her with something more than fear, trust. Trust she had no right to, yet could not betray. They carved through the canyon, rocks shielding them, the ambush struggling to reposition. Gunfire echoed, then waned as distance grew. When they finally collapsed behind stone, lungs heaving, the silence felt heavier than the storm. The lieutenant staggered up, face twisted with rage. "You compromised command's orders." She locked eyes with him, voice low but unshaking. "Command compromised us before we ever touched the ground." No one sided with the lieutenant. No one needed to. Their silence spoke louder than his rank. Hours bled into tense retreat, every step marked by loss. Not all had made it. Their faces lived now only in memory, in the dust carried on the wind. But those who remained owed their breath not to orders, but to defiance. At extraction, the chopper's roar felt different. Not salvation, but reckoning. No words were exchanged on the flight back. Only the hollow stare of soldiers who now understood what loyalty had cost them. She sat in the corner, rifle across her lap, horizon burning red once more. This time not from dawn, not from mortars, but from the fire inside her chest, steady, unyielding. Cole leaned closer, voice rough. "You made the call no one else would. Doesn't matter what command says after this. We all know who kept us alive." She nodded, but her gaze stayed on the horizon. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like anything more than a soldier who'd refused to stay silent. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And as the sun sank into red fire, the silence she carried no longer felt like weight. It felt like truth.